Ukraine and its allies are tirelessly working to hold Russia accountable for its heinous crimes against Ukrainian children. The International Criminal Court's issuance of arrest warrants for Russian President Vladimir Putin and Commissioner Maria Lvova-Belova on March 17, 2023, marks a hopeful step forward. Yet, as the toll of war on children continues to rise, we cannot stand idly by. A childhood marked by war is forever changed. As of October 2023, 18 months after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, 19,456 Ukrainian children have been illegally deported or forcibly displaced to either Russia or Russian-occupied areas within Ukraine.
Dear distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Labdien, Доброго дня. Welcome to the fourth panel discussion of today's conference, and in a forthcoming hour, we'll focus our attention on what is done and what can be done more about Ukrainian children deported by Russia. My name is Maximus Milda. I am a Ukraine country director at the Reckoning Project, and I came to this event straight from Kyiv. And I want to thank organizers for putting together this brilliant event, as well as for hospitality and support provided to all of us today. In Ukraine, my organization, the Reckoning Project, works since the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, and what we do is the meticulous collection of testimonies of witnesses of Russia's war crimes. More specifically, we bring together the power of the storytelling alongside with applying the highest standards of collection of testimonies from witnesses in order to open investigations within international jurisdictions and also via quasi-judicial platforms like the UN, OSCE, and the others. And at the core of our work is collection of testimonies from witnesses of deportations of children in Ukraine. If you want to learn more, please feel free to find it via thereckoningproject.com. Now, today, I'm particularly excited to introduce this terrific panel that will share insight on the matters of return and support of Ukrainian children. But first, let me introduce the members of the panel. It is Irina Suslova, who is a representative of the Commissioner for Children's Rights of Ukraine. It's Mariam Lambert, who is a co-founder and ground director of Orphans Feeding Foundation. It's Daria Kasyanova, head of Ukrainian Child Rights Network. It is also Liana Dambina, chair of the board of Children's Hospital Foundation, and Nathaniel Raymond, executive director of the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab. We'll proceed in the following manner. First, each of the panelists will share their brief introductory remarks related closely to their backgrounds, to the organizations that they represent here today, and how these organizations are involved in the support provided to children from who experience deportations, and how they're involved in returning children back to Ukraine. Next, after that, I'll follow up with individual questions to them. And of course, for those of you who have not had their headsets with you, you might need that because some of the remarks will be provided in Ukrainian. Irina, let's begin with you. Please share us your insight and your remarks on the matters of the support and the questions of how to return children back from being captivated by Russia.
Дякую. Шановні колеги, слухачі.
Dear listeners, first of all, it's worth mentioning that when we talk about return of Ukrainian children, we should mention that we don't have unified procedure, and each case, each returning is a unique special operation which cannot be described, and you may not have unified mechanism of return. Everything depends on which status has the child, whether it's forced displacement, occupation, or when the child has not so easy opportunities to return or has lost its parents. When we talk about support of children who return, it's worth mentioning the direct communication of the government and common work with government and non-governmental sector, international organizations, and our national organizations which provide complex support to government institutions in order to provide the support of interests of the child. We will discuss the way how Center of Children Protection is functioning, how we conduct the questionnaire of children, which support and services the state presents for each.
Miriam, I see that you are not alone from your organization here, but it's also this cutie pie there sitting on the table. So please share your perspective from the Orphans Feeding Foundation. What is your role and how are you involved there on the ground?
Thank you for inviting us. We are very privileged to be here. My name is Mariam Lambert. I'm actually a civil servant working for 18 years in the European Patent Organization. And when we receive our contract and knowing that then nothing can happen to us, everything is safe, our kids will be taken care of, we decided to give back. So to make it short, we started to, during our holiday, to build orphanages in Kenya, in Nepal, in Morocco, Romania, Belgium. And then we were about to do a really nice project, Hospitality School in Zanzibar, and the war started. Of course, there was nothing we could do than just also help in Ukraine. And the specificity of our NGO foundation is that everything we do, we are always on the ground to make sure that it gets faster to the people in need. So first time doing humanitarian in a war zone. We started in March 2022. And I have 5 minutes, so I can't tell you everything, but we spend most of our time, myself personally, in the occupied territory, in the front line, evacuating civilians from Bakhmut, Soledar, Kherson, Berislav, also connecting the women who are victims of rape, because when you are an old person like us, our brain, our heart is not trained for the war, our brain and our heart are not trained for the trauma we experience every single day. But we don't have time for us, so what we do, we connect people who need help with the right experts. Women who are victims of rape were connected with an association in order to seek further help. After that, we also distributed oncology treatment for people with cancer, because in this war, everyone should be taken care of, including the people who had cancer before the war and they were left behind. To make the story short, otherwise he will tell me to stop, but it's very close to my heart because I'm trying to explain you something that we have experienced every day, and of course I don't want to talk about that because it brings emotions to our experience. In July 2023, we decided to focus all our resources to the children. Why? Because on the 21st of June in 2023, the President Zelensky, together with the President of the European Commission, they made a common statement, and this is also why you are here today. They mentioned that every child has a right to be free, protected and safe. The Russian Federation has taken the right away from those children. They urged the Russian Federation to stop the deportation, to stop the immediate adoption, because this is something we need to highlight. Deportation, in the meantime, we have adoption as well. Based on that, they created Bring Kids Back program. And here we are today, all reunited. What is important also in our work is that together with Ombudsman Office, we have signed a memorandum of understanding together with the Presidential Office, because when it comes to children, since we are not experienced, we wanted to make sure that everything is compliant, that we respect the human rights and the dignity of those children and families. We started to do the work with my friend Irina, and we were tracing identification, but also always being present when there is a reunion. So I spent personally my time in the Belarusian border, at the Russian border in Kosnopilya, in order to make sure that those children would be safe. Together with Ombudsman, we were present. And I wish all of you today would see what we are seeing when a mother and a child are reunited, Everybody's seeing that as a victory. But when you are there and you see that, it is a big step, but it's the most awful thing that I have seen in terms of emotion. The screaming, the mother, the father touching the children for the next 7 hours to make sure that it's real. And that's what we have experienced. And we are there again. Why? Because we want to understand when they return what can be there, what can be done, how we can support them. And I will finish by this sentence. I'm not Ukrainian, and I'm very honored to be amongst those amazing ladies here. But you don't have to be Ukrainian to support Ukraine, because after 2 years it's not about supporting. You don't have to be Ukrainian to commit to your word. Means committing meaningfully, doing action to help those children. You just have to be a human being. As a European citizen, it is not just making something good for Ukraine. It's our moral responsibility. And the last sentence I want to say is that a lot of Ukrainian people, including my colleague, are always, every time I go to Ukraine, they're always thanking us for supporting Ukraine after 2 years, which irritated me because I know how absolutely beautiful those people are. But I told them, you should stop thanking us. We should be the one saying sorry. Sorry that after 2 years, we still didn't manage to return all those children. Sorry that after 2 years, civilians are being killed every day. Sorry that after 2 years, we didn't manage to mobilize the whole world. We talk about it in conference everywhere. But sorry, because despite all that, you are still begging us for support. So from today, I hope the people will ask the Ukrainians to stop saying thank you. This is our civil responsibility. Every day we need to push. We need to be the best headache for the whole world and talk about it every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. And clearly, I'm confident that each of us can only second what you're saying. It's about dignity, it's about decency. So truly, indeed, this is one of those things that unites us all here. Daria, you are with the Ukrainian Child Rights Network, and please share us your introductory remarks and your perspective on the support and returning children back to Ukraine.
Thank you. I represent Ukrainian Child Rights Network. It is Ukrainian Association of NGOs. It is different types of NGOs, international, national, local, but all of us work for children in child protection. And I'd like to say that deportation or reunification after deportation, of course, it is not our business and not our mandate, but from the first day of full invasion, we began to reunite children with their families. And maybe, firstly, we didn't understand nothing, and we didn't understand that it is about deportation. The statement, Ukrainian children who are particularly vulnerable victims should never be used as the word refugees, declared by the European Parliamentary Assembly, strongly resonates with us, Ukrainian Child Rights Network. However, the harsh reality remains that Ukrainian children forcibly displaced are still being treated as trophies by Russia, every day, unfortunately. Some of these children are illegally adopted by Russian families, losing their fundamental right to identity. Some become tool of Russian propaganda, while others are at the risk of being conscripted into the Russian army, leaving the certainty of their return home in doubt. The Way Home, our project, which we realized together with the Ministry of Reintegration, Office of Ombudsman, and with the financial support of Save the Children, strive to reunite abducted children with their families, relatives, or legal representatives in Ukraine. The journey is full with challenges, obstacles, and at times, life-dangerous situation. Over the past 2 years of full-scale war, we've successfully very I can say, условно, як це буде, not satisfactorily, but alive, brought back 141 children. And today we saw 7 children who were returned by our team, contributing to Ukraine's overall efforts of repatriating 388 children out of almost 20,000 officially identified as deported. However, official statistics and actual statistics may differ significantly. And every time when we return child, we find out about other children in Russia. And successfully bringing children back is only half the battle. All returned children require comprehensive and long-term rehabilitation and social services. While our organization provides diverse support, individual reintegration plan, and long-term assistance to each child we've returned home, the capabilities of civil society are limited. Children with disabilities or severe health conditions require even broader social services and should not return to institutional care. Hence, the development of comprehensive social services system and the implementation of the deinstitutionalization reform in Ukraine are urgent and paramount. In conclusion, I like to say the international community to focus its attention on the most vulnerable among the vulnerable, children with disability and of severe illnesses. It's important to address their unique needs, including special rules and conditions required for their safe return. Additionally, I appeal for support in developing a comprehensive social services system in Ukraine. It's our collective responsibility to ensure the well-being and future of these vulnerable children. Thank you.
Thank you, Daria. We'll definitely talk more about the limited capabilities and social support services, of course, but before we do so, I'd like to proceed to Liana. You had the chance to be here in different capacity at the opening of the conference. I'd like to thank you for doing so, but please let us know more, especially for those of us who come outside of Latvia, the role of the Children's Hospital Foundation and you as the chair of the board. What is your specific focus in this particular matter of returning children back to Ukraine?
Yes, unfortunately, we cannot return children back, but we can do things to support them here. And that is something that we've been doing from the actually first days when the war started, when Russia aggressively attacked Ukraine. We knew that there are going to be children coming abroad looking for refugee, and we knew that at that time there were pretty clear that there's going to be more emotional traumas than physical ones. Therefore, we concentrated all our effort on psychological support to these children. We also looked and happily found one refugee from Ukraine, child psychologist, because we understand that especially small children, to receive support, it has to be in their language. Natalia is still our wonderful colleague, has helped thousands of Ukrainian children here in Latvia, and of course their parents and caregivers. And of course, we also, as a Children's Hospital Foundation, working closely together with the Children's Clinical University Hospital, we organized all the care for these children who needed with physical disabilities, including that, and we still support many children who lack state support for specific health needs, just as some Latvian children lack this support. But it seemed like that is not enough, so we started to look how we can help those Ukrainian children who are still in Ukraine, living amidst the tragedy of war on an everyday basis. And from my perspective and experience, the best way how to support somebody is to build relationships. Therefore, we looked for organizations in Ukraine who do similar things that we do here. And now, for more than a year and a half, We have a wonderful two partners. One is Gen Ukrainian, providing those psychological camps for Ukrainian children, and one is the biggest children's hospital in Ukraine, Ahmadit Children's Hospital. And the format, because we wanted helping for just helping's sake is not something that Ukraine needs or we should do. Therefore, it was very important to us to understand what is actually the need and the format that we can provide it in a practical manner already now, not waiting for some better situation, but at this moment during the war. So we created those psychological rehabilitation camps for the patients of Ahmadit Children's Hospital. So far, we had 5 camps where children come with their mothers, and we provide psychological rehabilitation and of course, recreational activities. For the first time, and in context of this conference, we hosted deported children who have experienced deportation. We knew that it's going to be a different task, and luckily, it's been a week of the camp, and it looks like we have managed, and kids are smiling, playing, they're happy, at least for this moment and at this time, even though, of course, we all acknowledge that nothing has ended. And there's going to be a lot of support needed, not only in Ukraine, but abroad. So our goal and aim is to continue to support these children through the format of those rehabilitation camps that Ms. Zelenska also mentioned as necessary ones. And the other, as colleagues in Ukraine find it useful, is the experience and knowledge sharing among specialists, especially psychologists, psychiatrists, I'm talking only about childcare, sorry, to be specific. And that's something that we can also do. Therefore, with every camp, there are specialists coming from Ukraine, from Ahmadit Hospital, to learn new things, and us as well. We also need to learn many things about the help that we can provide, considering the very specific obstacles and circumstances that those children are, and we need to know the context so we could provide them more efficient and a better quality care.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lena, and I think we all also appreciated the mentioning of the wonderful experience that the Ukrainian children had here in Latvia when President Rinkevich, in his remarks, mentioned that Riga Castle was not the #1 experience, but rather other parts of this. And that's important. That's important when it comes to mental health support and the overall sense of joy in childhood that you can enjoy, right? And the deprivation of that joy is also one of the forms how atrocities are conducted by Russia. Now, Nathaniel, you are in charge of the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab, and it's great to have you here, joining us here in Riga in person. And let us know more how the role of Yale Humanitarian Research Lab plays in the chain that leads to return of children back to Ukraine. Please let us know more about your work.
Thank you very much. Before I start, just on a personal note, it is very poignant for me to be here in Latvia. My grandparents, my whole mother's side of the family in the United States, is Lithuanian and fled Lithuania before the start of the First World War. My great-grandfather, whose wedding ring I wear, was one of the book smugglers of Lithuania. And it is important why I bring this up is that the book smugglers were trying to save the Lithuanian language that was being destroyed by Russia under the Tsar, and they smuggled textbooks and Bibles from Germany and Sweden into Lithuania to keep the Lithuanian language alive in the face of Russification. So 2 days ago when I got off the plane, I drove to the Hill of Crosses in Lithuania and placed 2 crucifixes for my grandparents. And I was struck by if you don't know the Hill of Crosses, it was bulldozed 3 times by the KGB. And at night, the Lithuanians would return and stand the crosses back up every time. And those crosses became a symbol of those who were disappeared or missing underneath the Soviet era. And so it was poignant for me to be there and helped me really see the work we are doing now on Ukraine's children in the broader historical fabric of issues of events that go far back beyond this current moment, and also, we must remember, will extend through what we do now far into the future. So, who am I? I am the executive director of the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab at the Yale School of Public Health. I am a lecturer in epidemiology of microbial disease at Yale and also taught at the Jackson School of Global Affairs. But all of that, you can ignore it. I am, at my heart, a war crimes investigator and humanitarian aid worker for the past 24 years. I've served in Afghanistan and primarily in East Africa, including with the United Nations in South Sudan. My team, who are the real heroes here, I'm just the hype man, we use satellite imagery, commercial satellite imagery, combined with open source data from the internet and from other sources as part of what's called the Conflict Observatory. The Conflict Observatory is a program of the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of Conflict Stabilization Operations. Since the war started, we have been monitoring and documenting violations of international humanitarian law and threats and atrocities against civilians in Ukraine. And we have done that from the United States and elsewhere around the world. We are not operational on the ground, but the joke is we go to Ukraine every day, but just from space. And so in the first year of the program in 2022, we were primarily doing bomb damage analysis of schools and hospitals in Mariupol, Severodonetsk, and elsewhere. And then we did the analysis of the filtration camps and identified 27 filtration camps and also analyzed Olenivka and evidence of potential mass graves at Olenivka. We did an assessment of destruction of grain storage facilities in Ukraine with Oak Ridge National Laboratories from the U.S. Department of Energy. And we then got the mission in the summer of 2022 to look into the children's issue. And my initial response when we got that mission and the response of the team was, how are we going to do this? The breakthrough in the case became selfies. So selfies that were being taken by Russian officials. We were able to turn that into what? Latitude and longitude. And using the data that Russia itself was producing, and I'll just say here, as a war crimes investigator, the best scenario is when the perpetrator tells you what they did. And in this case, the main source of information was from the perpetrators themselves. We began work in summer into the winter of 22-23, and we had to make a very tough decision in January about whether we were going to release the report that ended up catalyzing the ICC's indictment against Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova. And because we had, so here's the numbers, we had 43 facilities identified, but we had, get ready for this, 80 facilities under investigation. We had 6,000 children identified. We now know that our number is closer to 10 to 12,000, and we'll be updating that publicly, hopefully in the next few months. So we knew we had more children, but we didn't have it to our 5-point standard of confidence. And so we're very conservative in what we put out. Everything has to be confirmed by 5 sources. And so we also knew that we had the chain of command very clearly down to the regional and municipal level, but that there was additional elements of the chain of command that we didn't fully have. But we made the decision in January to release in February. And how we made that decision is we went around the table. It was the first time we were all together in a room, and it was the only time we were all together. And we said, think of this decision about whether we release now as if you are a Ukrainian mother of a missing child. And we call it a go, no-go decision. And so we used the same method as NASA. And we went around to each person and said, okay, Ukrainian mother 1, go, no, go. And everyone said go. And we had, and why do I bring this up? I bring this up because it's very important. We had to make a very difficult protection decision. We knew that we were going to set in motion events that could have resulted in some children not coming home and would definitely result in Russia changing its, what we call tradecraft, the way in which it was concealing the locations of these children. And so we had to make a very tough call, and the call was go. Since that point, you have the indictment in March, 1 month after the release of the report. And then in November, Conflict Observatory in Yale released its second report on children about Belarus and the role of the Lukashenko regime, where we identified 2,443 children had been deported, and we had identified a detailed chain of command in a joint effort between Russia and Belarus. I will stop here, but I just want to say one last thing to frame up what role, to answer your question directly, what role does our work have in return? Unfortunately, I think it has the central role in return. And this is my one message. If you listen to anything I say, this is what it is. There are 4 missions happening at once, and they go in this order. Identify the kids. Recover the kids. Provide psychosocial and physical medical support to the kids and their families. And 4th, accountability. Notice how I say accountability last. Each of these 4 mission profiles are predicated by data. If we do not have accurate data, we will fail at each of them and all of them. At present, we are losing. I want to be clear. And we will win only if we succeed on the data. The last point is Frederick Douglass in the 19th century, in talking about slavery in America, said power concedes nothing without a demand. Putin will concede nothing without a demand so overwhelming that he cannot deny it. That demand is impossible if our numbers are wrong.
Thank you. As we are on the record, I just want to acknowledge the fact that the very issue that we have 2 Lithuanians, both from Yale, here on stage, it's a pure coincidence. It wasn't planned to happen like that. Now, пані Ірино, я б хотів запитати більше об ролі Центру захисту прав.
Irina would like to ask more about the role of support for the Center for Support of the Return of Ukrainian Children. What is the role? First of all, I would like to say that the Center for Protection of Children's Rights is part of the Ombudsman's Office.
Відповідальний за 4-й пункт формули миру президента Зеленського, яка в тому числі серед
And this is the peace formula of President Zelensky on deported and on the return of deported and forcibly transferred children. So the president of Ukraine said
завдання центру це стати першою локацією, бути першою локацією після повернення дітей з депортації.
and this is the first location.
І ми зустрічаємо цих дітей.
We're meeting with these children. We see their eyes. We can hear their questions.
Вчимо разом з ними.
We are silent with them. We review their
По суті,
drawings.
людьми, які
We are the people who are the first to hear the stories about which they're ready to testify to the Office of the Prosecutor General and the Security Service of Ukraine.
основних завдань Центру захисту прав людини це зробити
One of the key tasks of the Center for Protection of Children is to assess the needs of the child, understand what needs the child has, provide psychological support.
відновити. Це питання медичного
The matter of medical
медичного супроводу,
support, social support, providing all of this comprehensive set of measures, and also organize the Interviews. The interviewing is done by the prosecutor's office and the security service of Ukraine. It's based on Barnahus system, and the facilities are in our center. It meets all international standards to protect the best interests of the child. The interviews are conducted with support of a psychologist and presence of a psychologist, and the child can stop the interview at any time. Because our task is to avoid traumatizing the child and to make sure that, on one hand, the investigators get the evidence. On the other hand, the child leaves with trust for Ukraine. When you meet the child in the center, you have to understand that Ukraine is about kindness, about support, the people who will protect you if anything wrong goes to you. Second component, we established an interdisciplinary group with the participation of the government, with regular weekly meetings discussing the matters of returned children, the kinds of challenges they faced, what needs to be done, and what fields. And they're trying to face those issues. We cannot say that this is simple. We cannot say that Ukraine has established this work in a super mega ideal way. As of now, we have a lot of challenges. We realize that, and unfortunately, the government is not always capable to face this amount of challenges. Nobody was ready to full-scale invasion. Nobody was ready to missiles flying around. The fact that the number of schools and houses and hospitals will be destroyed every day. We didn't think we would have to choose schools based on the presence or absence of bomb shelters. A lot of things that need to be taken into account after the return. And a lot of NGOs are participating in that. The organization Voices of Children, under the guidance of Olena Razvadovska, they provide full psychological support, not only during the interviews, but also after the interviews for every child, as long as necessary. They work online or offline, depending on where the child is. This is the matter of reintegration. The matter of social support, case managers who have to maintain regular contact with the child after the child returned to the territory of Ukraine and maintain it as long as necessary for the family. This is the matter of temporary housing. So let's be honest, if we're talking about parental children who are coming back, then usually these are the children with parents who were in the occupied territories or they were separated on the occupied territories. So then we mean that the child has no place to live and the parents don't have a place to live. Their house, their accommodation was lost. So we need to make sure those people can have some temporary housing, some temporary shelter, and set up their lives. So it seems to me that our role is not that. It may seem like our role is not big in our process, but it is decisive because depending on how we meet the child, depending on how the process is organized, that will affect how the child will go further along the life with their supporters. And if the child is over the age of 18, under the age of 18, like Bogdan Yermokhin, we spoke about this. Bogdan Yermokhin came back on the day when he turned 18. He got full support, and case managers keep communicating with him, and they maintain his support. It's important. We're returning 18-year-old children. We're talking about children who were children at the time of full-scale invasion. The state is obliged to do so. Thank you. That's why I wanted to ask that. Thank you, Irina.
Introductory remarks with an international context and setting us in a position of before 2022 and the operations that have been happening around the world, right? So in this context, trying to fit the story of deportations of Ukrainian children in the context of atrocities happening around the world, what do you see unique in this particular case? What makes the story of Ukrainian children being deported different from similar cases, similar trust has been happening all around the world, let's say West Africa for that sake, or any other parts of the world?
Thank you very much for this very tricky question. What makes it unique is that we can't deny that we didn't know. We can't deny that we were not informed. I mean, you understand that all the information is known to the public. What is making it unique is that actually, I don't have the word to describe what makes it unique, because you need to be there. And I know it's not safe to say that because it's still under shelling and it's still even in Kiev. But you need to be there to understand that what makes it unique is that those children, when they are returned, they don't want to go to have a nice life. They will sacrifice their life to bring their friends back. And that's a good example of Bogdan, who is here. When I ask him, what do you want to do now? You want to study? No. I will work and I will make sure that I'm bringing my friends back. He's 18. We were all having a nice life when we were 18. And that's what is unique. I would like to add an important point, what Irina just mentioned, and that's how also to explain the importance of partnership and memorandum of understanding. She was talking about the Children's Rights Protection Center, which I'm really amazed by the work they're doing. And they give us the privilege also to be there, to meet also with the children, because it's important when you speak to them, and of course any information we have on those children, we just transfer to Irina's team. It's to understand what are the needs after. I like to be pragmatic and not to be in the theoretical. Just for you to understand what she's saying is that there is one Children's Rights Protection Center in Kiev. One. What does it mean? When you're underground, you understand that those children, when they are reunited, they start from different places in Russia. They have to travel all the way to Moscow. From Moscow, depending on what they have found as a solution of the return, they have to go from Moscow, maybe by car, by train, we don't know. It's every single child has a different way of returning, depends on the cases. Then they go through different borders, sometimes Russian border with Ukraine, but that doesn't happen anymore. Most of the time they go where? They have to cross 4 countries. That's what she's talking about. The child goes from Moscow, Minsk, sometimes they have to go to Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. 3 days later, finally they're crossing the Ukrainian border. But that's not finished. After that, there's another 10 hours drive to go to Kiev, because that's the first place in the Child Rights Protection Center that they need to go to all this process. The conclusion of that is that what she's trying to say, and that's what I'm trying to tell the whole world, is that a child, when he's 8, when he's 6, he's been traveling without the parents for 4 days, but he knows that it's not over when he crosses the border. He still needs to go to this sometimes it's quite heavy process because they need to talk about it. The only place they have is Kiev. So what we are doing together, I'm giving another headache to the whole world to say our foundation is trying to gather sponsoring from governmental, so maybe Latvia could do that as well. We can talk about this in order to build another child protection center in Rivne. Because for the moment we go in the Belarusian border. And later on we have to assess the situation with Irina teams and Mr. Lubinets, Ombudsman Ukraine, to see whether it will be possible to do that in Sumy, in case this border is also open. So when we talk about having another child rights protection center, I want you to understand why. You just realize, what does it do to a child when they are 4, 5, 6 years old, traveling for 4 days, exhausted, and then we have to accommodate them as well, because when they go there, there is no place to sleep. This is what we call partnership. But this is also why I want the whole world to understand why we are asking for this. It's not just for the sake of having another child rights protection center. Next to that, we are also making the difference of another center, and this is where you are entering into the picture, when a family is reunited and they can go back, they're released. Some of them, they have no place to go because Irina explained that the village is completely destroyed. And today, Ukraine has 10,000 things to think about. So they're looking for international cooperation for us to think with them, to help them to fill the gap. And you know what is the gap? It's the first mission that I was with Mr. Lobinets. There was a family with a mother. She had her 2 children, 6 and 8 years old. They came back, we celebrated, it was nice, it was a really good feeling. They were reunited, and the next day I asked them, of course, what is the next plan? Where are you going? And she looked at me and she said, I'm going back to Kupiansk. So you realize, where is Kupiansk? It's in the front line. She said that 2 months ago. We're working on that case, actually, with her team. That means that after all what they've been through for 2 years, they have no other choice than going back to a city which is still under shelling. We can't stay silent. We can't just be convinced that things need to be done. And that's our work together with them. So please reach out to us to see what can be done. Please come to us, because those children, the reality behind the Bring Kids Back is a big step, because before there was nothing. But when you get into it, it's a dramatic situation for the children. So let's talk more about bringing life back to those children after bringing them back. And that's extremely crucial. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Daria, we have just heard from Irina first that it's not only about the government and the Child Protection Center's role, but it's also about the close cooperation with non-governmental organizations, because there are so many demands that need to be fulfilled, and we heard some of the examples of those organizations. Now you represent the entire network of those different sorts of organizations, right, who are on the ground. And in the course of last 2 years, you've been heavily invested in providing support. I'm curious to learn, how did the dynamic of cooperation between these NGOs change in the last 2 years? Because clearly demands are different as the time goes on. So what's been that dynamic of change, and where are we now in this timeline?
Okay, I think NGO is a champion of change, and our very cool skill to transform to circumstances. And of course, I understand that it's easy for some NGOs, not for all, especially for international, than for government. And I can say that, first of all, we, like Ukrainian Child Rights Network and our member, we prepared to the full invasion. In December of 2021, we had meeting and discussed how we can prepare, what we can to do. And we prepared mapping and analyzed all institutions in Ukraine which were near the border. Yes, it's 10 regions of Ukraine. We analyzed all foster families, especially foster families with children more than 5, and families with children with disability, and wrote letters to our government and to communicate with their main partners like UNICEF, how to provide protection or some decision for these children and this family. Of course, some of our members, really the most part of our members, had experience of 2014, 2015, and we evacuated in 2014 more than 40,000 people from Donetsk and Lugansk region, including children from institution and foster families. It was 12,000 of children, but unfortunately, we didn't evacuate the children from the Crimea, and more than 4,000 children left in the Crimean institution. And we thought about it every time. And we remember and knew a lot of cases about deported children from Donetsk and Lugansk regions who was deported to Russia, by the way. And it was very public cases, very propaganda cases, and we tried to took account all this experience. But I'm sure that it is impossible in some cases because some of our members were in Mariupol, for example, or in Kharkov region, or in Kherson region, and these people and this organization were traumatized. Some of them, unfortunately, lost the members of their families, and in some cases we support this organization and our partners. But of course we had very strong understanding what is the strong position of our organization and who can evacuate children and families from Donetsk, Lugansk, Kharkov, Kherson region, and which from our partners can meet our families or children in the western part of Ukraine. And we co-organized this process of evacuation and meeting. After meeting, of course, we understood that it is necessary to provide basic needs for these families and children. And we find housing, temporary housing for these children. By the way, SOS Children Villages, I am the program director of this organization. We provide temporary housing for more than 1,000 of foster families, not only in Ukraine, but in Europe. And we continue to support social support for these families and understand how important to provide psychological support and continue to do it. That's why our activities continue. There are a lot of projects and a lot of partners, but today really is the most sensitive and the most difficult question, how to return our children from Russia or how to return our children from temporary occupied territories, because the biggest enemy for our children now it's time, and we understand it. And of course, the second important question for our network, how to provide foster families for these children, not institution, but foster families. And we discussed every time how we can, and by the way, we had experience when after returning child from Russia or from occupied territory, these children were placed in foster family. And it is very important that these children will place in family with very similar cultural and regional characteristics. And by the way, girl from Kherson region, we were placed in family from Kherson region who are now in the social villages in Bravary near the Kiev. That's why it's a huge responsibility, but I'm sure that we need to do what we have to do and collaborate and have partnership with every who would like to return our children and to continue support.
Thank you very much, Daria. Lena, we have heard these terrific examples how despite all odds, counterparts in Ukraine are still managing to provide support to the kids. Now, on the international side, what can international organizations, international stakeholders learn from Ukrainian peers in providing support in the way? What have your organization learned from Ukrainians in these 2 years?
Yes, we have learned a lot since they are the ones who also, some of them had the experience of 2014.
Yes.
When already was a military Russian aggression and these events leading to displacement of children, of seeing horrific tragedies, experiencing themselves. Therefore, they already had knowledge which we did not have here in Riga and Latvia. And therefore, that was something that was very valuable to us, especially at the beginning. Afterwards, as we saw international community, everybody tried to learn from everybody. And that's actually, I think it was a wonderful thing that hopefully will continue no matter what. But that was one aspect. The other is that we, for us, as I already mentioned, it's very important to understand how they work with children so we could take over. And we hear the format as we are providing help, it's not a long-term support. Therefore, we need to know our boundaries. We need to be very responsible because we understand what a fragile state these children are in. Therefore, we cannot harm them. You know, that would be the worst thing. They come for help, and we are being irresponsible and trying to provide something which is not going to be helpful. Therefore, the aspect of this very close cooperation, while they are interested to learn things from us organizational-wise, like we have those community mental health centers here in Latvia, small ones in various places in Latvia, so the help is accessible, the help is really based in community, because we understand that there's not going to be enough specialists for all the children, unfortunately. That's the fact. And therefore, all of us come into the picture, the community, which can help in many ways. Each of us can help enormously with emotional support, with practical support, which is also always an emotional support, the component in it. Therefore, the value of school environment. And we see that there are problems in schools with bullying, unfortunately, also in Latvia, Ukrainian children facing these problems, and it is very important to acknowledge them, to speak openly about it, that we do have it, and to address them. Because no specialist is going to be able to fix anything if the environment is not supportive. Therefore, this is something that I know that Ukrainian colleagues are thinking and working on as well, the social support, and very other aspect important is the family, because the most important resource to any child is his parents or her parents, at least mother, or in some cases, unfortunately, only grandparents or guardians. Therefore, the mental state and the support, psychological support that those adults receive is gonna directly impact the mental health state of these children. And sometimes we kind of leave those adults out of the picture and concentrate on the children, which is not gonna bring a long-term result. Long-term result can come only if we bring the whole family in the picture and support them all as the system. And then again, the community support comes in as a awfully important aspect of the care. Therefore, it's an ongoing process. We're learning from each other because, as odd as it can sound, Latvian adolescents have similar difficulties. We have suicide risk children, we have self-harm, we have depression, we have anxiety. Therefore, there are methods that can be valuable not only to Ukrainian children, but we are facing actually the mental health of our adolescents, of course in a different context, but still there are some similarities, and therefore we just try to learn from each other in an ongoing process.
Thank you, Elena. Although we are just 1 minute short of finishing this panel, but I will not finish it before asking you, Nathaniel, a question that is as follows. We have heard many points of view on how the support can be provided, what is needed, and I think I at least learned 3 things. NGOs and non-state actors are truly agents of change, and that's reassuring. That's important to keep in mind for many of us here who represent civil society, that it's not nothing that we can contribute, but quite on the contrary. We're agile, we're flexible, we can do more in close cooperation with government stakeholders, and that works as well. The second point is about infrastructure, and something that triggers me to think of support to children as a part of recovery of Ukraine. We think about reconstruction of Ukraine often a very tangible means, building things, but reconstruction of Ukraine is also about reconstructing social fabric, and that's something very soft and important. And the third, that it's not a one-way street. It's not some sort of providing aid one way, and that's we learn a lot from Ukraine, and it's important to have this know-how accumulated and to benefit from that. So this reciprocity, in a sense, is crucial. But This all is possible only if we know where from to return kids. And now, the country that's been mentioned here all day long, Russia, of course, is self-evident, but there is also someone else in the room, and that's Belarus. You talked a bit about Belarus. Last time I checked, there was no indictment for Mr. Lukashenko. We hardly ever hear about Belarus that much. Thanks to the report of Yale Humanitarian Research Lab, we know that Belarusian Red Cross is hardly any Red Cross at all, but in many ways, quite on the contrary, is complacent in dealing with deportations. Now, what is the role of Belarus? What are the patterns of Belarus right now? How should, because maybe it's not only kidnapped by Russia, perhaps it should be kidnapped by Russia and Belarus. Would you agree on that?
That's complicated. Let me explain. So the Belarus investigation was crucial for us to understand not only how Belarus is running its operation, but it gave us insight to how Russia is running its operation. So what we discovered, which was critical on Belarus, which is different than Russia's program to a degree, is that it relies on a very complex network of civil society organizations and nationalist extremist groups. Most notably for the, quote, patriotic re-education, so-called patriotic re-education, it involves basically a young youth political organization called a Young Republican Group, plus the Night Wolves, which is a motorcycle gang, the Night Valkyries, which is the female version of that motorcycle gang, a group called the Dolphins, which is a swim club that specifically works with disabled children. And so it's important here to understand that at the heart of this network is Alexei Tilley, who is a paraplegic Paralympian athlete, and the Alexei Tilley Foundation. And so while Shemtov, the head of the Belarus Red Cross Society, has played a role, and the Belarus Red Cross Society is under investigation and sanction from the International Committee of the Red Cross. And just full disclosure, I am on the advisory board for the Red Cross for the Professional Standards for Protection work, so which relates directly to these issues of humanitarian aid worker conduct. Tilley is at the heart of the entire operation. And with the investigative committee, known as the IC, which fancies itself sort of Russian FBI, in identifying children, along with, for the first time, we see clear evidence that FSB has been involved, but we do not know exactly how, but we have confirmed FSB involvement. So you have in Belarus this focus on deportation of highly vulnerable children, many with disabilities, many from lower income households, many children of families where the parents, mostly the men, but not only, are fighting, and the use of cadet corps for identification of the children at the school level. And so, and they almost all run, we haven't seen an example of them not running, through Rostov-on-Don with a cooperative agreement with Russian Railways. And then a soccer team uses their buses to take them from the railway station. 80% of them estimated are at OJSC Belaruskali, which is a potash company at the Dubrava camp. So the majority are there. Some, now, this is the critical thing. We don't know if the children have returned. We see no evidence, so that's why I hesitated on your question, that we see no evidence yet of forced adoption or fostering. The children are primarily from Donetsk and Luhansk, and the claim of Lukashenko and others is that they've returned. We have not been able to verify that. No one else has been able to verify that. To go to the beginning of your question, in terms of the International Criminal Court, which I will not speak for, I would say watch this space, We released the report in November. Now, ICC will do what it's going to do. Again, I am not the ICC, but the wheels of justice on this are turning rapidly. And so I can give you information. So everyone hold on to your seats. Yale has transferred directly our underlying data from the first children's report to the International Criminal Court. This is a big deal because it represents the first American transfer to the ICC. And then the second point here is we are standing by to do the same on Belarus. I want to make one last point that's kind of to the side, but I don't want this conference to end without saying it because it should be the headline here of the conference. With 9/11, you had 3,100 approximately Americans die and become a missing persons case in 16 acres of land. The FBI and the US government, the most advanced law enforcement and DNA capacity in the world, took the better part of 2 decades to close that case, okay? Now, what we're talking about is a minimum of 30,000 children, which is 10 times 9/11. It's probably significantly higher in the 6 digits, okay? And so we're talking about 10 times the size of 9/11 with a country that is being bombed, the largest single missing persons case anywhere since World War II, with a country at war. And we are dealing with a data challenge for these children that represents at least 3 times the data challenge on the Srebrenica identification for the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, which was the largest missing persons identification ever attempted in the context of armed conflict. And so I don't want you to leave this conference without understanding that we are talking about the most monumental missing persons identification challenge in the history of the modern world, okay? Let us be clear on that. And the technical requirements, as someone who's been doing missing person searches, including Guatemala, including in Ethiopia and Afghanistan, my specialization is mass graves and missing persons, okay? This is as hard as it gets. So 16 acres of 9/11, 3,500 miles from Black Sea to the Eastern Pacific close to Japan. That is what we're talking about.
Thank you, Nathaniel. I think so.
And the victims aren't dead. They're alive and they're growing.
And I think your remark here on the wheels of justice and its justice is inevitable is crucial here. So despite all of these challenges, despite the obstacles, the commitment, the determination, and the ability to determine the horizon that we are leaning towards is crucial here. So I want to thank all of the panelists for incredible insights. We are like 8 minutes past the end of our panel, but the good news is that we have a very short coffee break through which there'll be a chance to interact swiftly. And when you're returning to this room, please grab a headset because you'll need it for the next panel that starts here at 5 p.m. unless Miriam has a 10-second note to say, and then we're finishing it.
Got to ask you what can be done also from your side. We are not talking about that here, but you know, we need to raise awareness all around the world. The coalition is doing that absolutely amazingly, but that means that we should stop, I mean, we should not stop, but we should focus. Maybe what we can do is focus awareness and making sure that this message go through countries which are friendly with Russia. That's extremely important. If you have any connection in India, in China, and just raise awareness about what is going on, because they might think it's propaganda. They might think that it's not real. They might think that Ukraine is brainwashing you as well. So that's something that the international community, our international community can do, is to start also sending the message to those countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam.